anybody, at least in this country, over the past few years, because Adrian's been touring with them, recording with them, and been in close quarters with all of them. So what did you think this morning? My first impression when I got a phone call from Los Angeles was shocked, but then not surprised, because having met him several times, I've always thought, it's just a matter of time here.
Well, I was incredibly shocked, actually, because Dennis Wilson has always had this zest for life, and the last thing that would ever enter his mind, in my opinion, is suicide or anything like that. I mean, it's so sad. My first reaction, I think, was to put on a nostalgic record of theirs, like Warmth of the Sun or something, and sit down and just think, oh, God, it's the Beatles thing happened. It's, the foundation has been broken, and it can never come back again. I felt very sad indeed.
It was because the headlines, the front page on the paper today, it's because Dennis was not one of rock and roll's great foundations like, say, Lennon or Elvis, but because he was a part of this group that was the Beach Boys, the Wilson brothers especially.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, Dennis Wilson was the only surfer in the band anyway. Right. And I think it's amazing that Brian Wilson must have got some ideas from Dennis Wilson.
Well, Brian says, that they never would have got onto the surfing records and cut that first record 23 years ago if it hadn't have been for Dennis coming back from school and saying, hey, Brian, why didn't you write a song about surfing?
Well, that's right, yes. Absolutely.
And off they went. Well, I saw him 2 weeks ago, just by accident, when I was in Los Angeles, and I was in that bar in the hotel, and up the other end of the bar I could hear this voice, familiar voice, and I could see this dishevelled figure shouting requests at the pianist. And I went up there and said, hello, Dennis, and he remembered me, and we sort of sat there, and he was knocking back these tequila sunrises like orange juice, and was just a very sad guy at the time. You say he lived life to the full, but very sad because he was just going through another divorce. I lost count. I think it must have been number 5.
They've had their fair share of emotional traumas, which is very sad.
Yes, because it's been by far, as I'm sure you've seen, being closely into it all, it's been far from the happy face that the music has presented of the Beach Boys over the years. You've got this impression of happiness. The records just conjured up this impression, didn't they?
That's right. I think that the one thing that's really got me down is that when I first met Dennis Wilson, his dream was to get Brian back on the road again, and he was so impressed with the record I made, Beach Boy Gold, and he wanted me to get involved with Brian and sort of stimulate him again, and his dream was really to get Brian back again, and he wanted to see that. He wanted to live to see that, and it's sad that hasn't come about.
No, not really. It sort of happens fitfully, doesn't it? People say Brian's fine because Dennis lived in that shadow. He idolised Brian, as far as I could see.
Oh, absolutely. Didn't he? Oh, Brian really was like a father to him rather than a brother.
Yeah.
He absolutely idolised him. Yes, it's...
But living at close quarters with them and seeing that the frictions there between the brothers especially and Mike Love, who you've been working with recently.
Yeah, Mike was over here a couple of weeks ago and we did a few interviews here and there.
Yeah, but there was a lot of friction there, wasn't there, between Mike and Dennis?
It was on and off. I think they grew to live with it. Actually, when I was touring, no, it wasn't too bad. Now and then there were a few arguments, but actually they did talk now and then quite casually, no problems.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. You don't believe me. I was there, I witnessed it.
And it's just incredible too, the popularity of this group, of the Beach Boys, which was shown just a couple of months ago in that compilation, the double album, which was #1 yet again.
I know. The music has to come back again. The style of music. I'm determined to see that happen.
A one-man campaign, maybe.
Oh, God. What about one man? But I'm determined to see it happen. It's got to happen. It's a unique form of music. And Brian, the Beach Boys, all 5 guys, they really did have a unique sound that no one has ever repeated.
Until now. Until you.
Well... Yes.
That must have been the biggest thrill. If we turn the clock back, because the last appearance that the Beach Boys made in this country was at the Capital Nebworth Festival, what was that, 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
Possibly,
now?
yeah. I would say 4 3.5.
Yeah, that was the last appearance they made in this country, and it was as a result of that you were in touch with them, or Bruce got in touch with you and put you in touch with the rest of the guys, and then you actually went out on the road with them, didn't you?
It was amazing. I mean, the second night, I met them in New York, and the second night, Bruce said, "Oh, come on, just put a guitar on and come up and play with us. You know all the numbers, play along." Oh, that was wonderful. But when I look back now, it's so sad reading. I mean, looking at the Standard now, the front page of the Standard, it's yuck.
Right, let's hear another song.
We've been friends now for so many.
Friends, the Beach Boys, song written by Brian and by Carl and by Dennis and by Al Jardine as well. And for the next 20 minutes or so, we're playing the Beach Boys, talking a bit about them to Adrian Baker, who's been very close with the two of them over the past few years. And the phone call I got this morning from Bruce Johnston, he said, of course, the Beach Boys will continue. There will still be a band, because Dennis hasn't actually been out with them for the past year because he had an operation. He had a growth in his throat.
Yeah, in his throat. Yes. Yeah.
Which he told me had been the operation had been completely successful because it wasn't a malignant growth, and he was healing up fine.
He was rather erratic though. His voice was sometimes one day it was wonderful, the next day he couldn't say a word.
Yeah.
It didn't affect his drumming though.
Right.
I think maybe the alcohol had something to do with that.
How did you rate him as a drummer when you were out there with him on the road?
I mean, well, actually, he was incredibly solid. An amazingly heavy, solid rock drummer. He really was.
Nothing fancy.
No.
Nothing
You'd
fancy.
never get anything fancy out of him, no.
No.
But incredibly solid. I've never heard a drummer... Well, we had various drummers play with the Beach Boys, and he was sort of twice the volume of every other drummer. I mean, he's a real rock drummer. And very good, very, very solid, steady.
It was that other traumatic experience that he had back at the end of the 60s, the Charles Manson thing, which he would never really talk to me about, because there was that period where he was friends with Manson before the Sharon Tate
Well, you say
murders.
that, I mean, none of the Beach Boys would really talk about that.
Hmm.
I mean, in the 3 years that I've known the Beach Boys, I mean, it was hardly ever mentioned. So I know very little about that era, actually.
Hmm. Just another of those amazing ups and downs that they've had over this almost a quarter of a century we'll be coming up to now.
That's right.
And of course there was that story, was it earlier this year, the one from the White House with James Watt, Secretary of the Interior,
That's
who
right.
banned them, who didn't want them to play in Washington on Independence Day because he said they were un-American or something, or
And
encouraged undesirable
President Reagan
people.
phoned Mike Love up and apologised. That was wonderful, yeah.
They got the greatest free publicity. It must have been $10 billion worth of free publicity out of
Oh,
that.
yeah.
What about the songs that Dennis wrote? Because he didn't write prolifically, because he was, of course, living in the shadow of Brian and Mike when they were cranking out those incredible hits. Dennis must have been, I guess, a bit intimidated by those songs.
Possibly. Actually, Dennis did play me a lot of songs, unrecorded songs, in the bars after we played the gigs. And he did have a few really nice songs. I couldn't believe it. I mean, although his voice had gone, he's given me the idea. He's saying that Brian's going to do this for me. He's going to do this. And he played me the songs, and they were really quite good.
Here's one of his songs coming up now from the album So Tough. This one is called Cuddle Up. That's a Dennis Wilson song from the album Carl and the Passion, So Tough, and that's called Cuddle Up. My guest is Adrian Baker. We're talking about the Beach Boys, and specifically Dennis Wilson, who died this morning at about 1:45 our time it was, that he drowned when he dived off a yacht in Los Angeles. And he actually told me a couple of weeks ago that he sold his yacht and was on somebody else's yacht, according to the report. So as we've said, Adrian, that obviously they've said it will continue after a period of silence. And I did see an interview with Mike Love done when he was over, that they were planning to come over to Europe and do some shows. Do you recall hearing that?
There's a rumour every 6 weeks, I think, that the Beach Boys are coming to England. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I think they'd love to, but there's a lot of problems involved with them coming to England and Europe. I think it's something to do with cash.
Yeah, because they do make an awful lot of it in America,
in
don't
America,
they?
I mean, it's
And it costs
crazy.
them an awful lot to come over here.
too right. Yes.
So what about your plans? Because you've been doing this work with Mike Love. There was that Christmas single he had out, and you've been doing some other things with him, I know, as well.
Well, actually, I've been working quite hard with Mike Love. We've got two concepts going, really. We've got a sort of dance concept going. I've got an album practically finished, and I'm working on this summer sound, the nostalgic. I'm trying to do a new wave nostalgic sound of the Beach Boys, and I think it's going to come off for this spring with Mike Love and maybe hopefully Al Jardine and Bruce Johnston.
Oh, you would actually go over there and do this as well?
Oh yes, well, between England and America, yeah, California.
How about going out on the road with them again?
I'd like to, but just for a short while. But the trouble is, I've been on the road for about 2 years, and it's put me 2 years behind in the recording business, and I don't like that. It's going to be very hard to get back working again, flowing again, should I say, in the recording business.
It must be great fun for a short time to be out there with them.
Exactly. I don't think it's fair to just go out and pick and choose when I want to play. You can't do that. I mean, they work very, very hard. I mean, they work for about 7 or 8 months a year. I mean, and they're working practically every night. And their idea of a holiday is 3 days off. You know.
And amazing the size of the places that they play and the audience that still come today, even though they haven't had any hits for yonks. I mean, they're still packing out these auditoriums.
The average audience is about 15,000. That's the average. And they normally sell out in America. It's amazing.
Quite incredible.
Yeah. And I hope it carries on that way. I'm sure it will.
Right. Well, Adrian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going to play a song from the solo album. Dennis only had one solo album out about 6 years ago, and here's a song from that.